Johnny Whitaker was once the boy America believed could only be headed toward a brighter future. A radiant face, clear, innocent eyes, a soaring voice echoing through film and television in the late 1960s. Everything about him carried the shape of a star, seemingly destined for greatness. At a very young age, Johnny stood beside major names, appeared regularly on national television, and was called the golden child of the post-war American family. Yet the very moment those stage lights turned on so early also planted the seed for a journey that would veer in a completely different direction. Few could have imagined that behind the image of the polite, well-mannered, gifted little boy was a childhood swept forward too fast, where the line between performance and real identity blurred to a dangerous degree. When the applause faded, that Johnny stepped into a void no one had taught him how to face. Disorientation, a sense of abandonment, and the confusion of someone who had been loved too early but no longer knew who he was without the camera in front of him. Johnny Whitaker's adulthood did not follow the glamorous path the public once envisioned. It became a series of struggles with himself, with wrong choices, with the darkness left behind by early fame. Talent once praised turned into a burden. Glorious memories became pressure. And the faith others had in him slowly transformed into the most painful question of all. If he was no longer the angelic boy everyone remembered, then who was Johnny Whitaker? His story is not only about a child star, but about the silent price of light that comes too soon, and the difficult journey of finding oneself again after everything has fallen into silence. Behind that familiar face was a very different life. John Orson Whitaker Jr. was born on December 13, 1959, in Van Nuys, Los Angeles, into a family with 8 children. The 5th child, Johnny grew up in a house that was always full, where voices overlapped and daily schedules were crowded. Space was shared. Attention had to be divided. Children learned early how to wait their turn and how to hold their place within a structure already in motion. His family was connected to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The church created a fixed rhythm: choir, youth activities, moments of being called to the front to read or sing. In that environment, standing before many eyes became normal. Johnny grew used to waiting for a cue, following the lead of adults, and raising his voice within an order where presence was acknowledged on the spot. On one occasion, while accompanying his sister to an audition, Johnny was kept in front of the camera. He stood on the exact tape mark on the floor, read a few lines, nodded. Another appointment was quickly noted. There was no long-term plan, just one booking after another, enough for the camera to gradually become a familiar part of family life. At 3 years old, Johnny appeared in his first commercial for a local used car dealership. At a small set, bright lights, adults moving in and out. He stood in position, repeated the action, waited for the signal. Then came bigger commercials, more travel, and waiting time became a familiar part of the week. Mornings at church, afternoons on set, 2 parallel rhythms. In one place, Johnny was a child in a community setting. In another, Johnny was a child working in front of a camera. Being called in to film became routine, along with schedules, crews, and the people who decided what came next. His early years were not marked by one defining event. They were filled with a split rhythm between family, church, and set life. An early habit of appearing, standing before watching eyes, and being called out from the crowd before Johnny was old enough to understand that those rhythms would also shape how he existed when filming schedules were no longer steady. In 1965, Johnny stepped out of the world of commercials to play the childhood version of Scotty Baldwin on General Hospital. The process was not framed as a special moment. It was repeated auditions, standing before the camera reading a few lines, then waiting for decisions from people seated behind a table. When Johnny's name appeared on the list of those selected, the work schedule changed. From scattered shoots, he began appearing regularly on a daytime television set. And in the role of Scotty, Johnny had to maintain the character across many non-consecutive shooting days. Scenes were filmed according to production needs, not story order. He came to the set, waited for his turn, stepped into a scene for a few minutes, then left to make space for others. The character had to remain continuous in memory, even when he did not appear every day. General Hospital placed Johnny within a structure that commercials had never required: a fixed shooting schedule, ongoing scripts, and the demand to keep the character consistent across episodes. Scotty continued to appear in later installments, in pre-written dialogue, within a storyline far longer than any job he had done before. From this point on, acting was no longer short-term appearances. It was tied to a schedule, to days that required showing up on time, in the right setting, in step with a television machine that did not stop to wait for a child to grow up. In 1966, Johnny appeared in The Russians Are Coming. The Russians Are Coming. The role was not large, but a film set quickly taught a child the difference between appearing and being placed inside a system. Cameras were positioned farther away. Our waiting times stretched longer. Adults spoke less and worked more. Within that structure, Johnny worked alongside Brian Keith and learned something very specific. On a set, trust was not measured by praise, but by whether he could keep the right rhythm through each take. When CBS prepared a new family sitcom, Brian Keith introduced Johnny for the role of Jody Davis. It was a small link in the casting process, yet it placed Johnny directly at the center of late 1960s American television. The living room moved by prime time, a time slot that could determine whether an evening felt calm or unsettled. Family Affair entered that slot. The show did not simply need a cute boy, it needed a steady rhythm to hold up a model American family, orderly, gentle, and suggesting that loss could still be arranged into something livable through proper care. From late 1966 onward, Johnny stepped into the regular filming schedule of a sitcom. Jody Davis appeared as a soft anchor within the frame. Reactions measured, lines concise, eyes that knew when to pause so adults could complete the order of the scene. Johnny's acting did not rely on emotional peaks. It relied on the discipline of consistency, the quality that allowed audiences to recognize him within seconds, then feel assured that the room on screen still operated by familiar rules. Behind that sense of reassurance was repeated labor. A shooting day began with call time, wardrobe, lighting, and taped floor marks. A short scene was broken into small parts: stand in the right place, enter at the right beat, maintain the same energy level despite long waiting periods. Johnny had to appear bright at the start of the day and remain bright at the end, even as a child's body grew tired. Stability on screen was purchased through very early self-control from a child. When scripts were rewritten to make Jody and Buffy twins, Johnny's image was fixed more firmly in public memory. The pair created a clear visual identity, easy to rerun, easy to remember, easy to become a symbol of a certain kind of safe childhood. From that point, Johnny was no longer just a child actor with a leading role. He became part of the language of the family sitcom, appearing on time, at the right rhythm, with the familiar face audiences expected. While Family Affair held the axis, other sets filled the rest of the week. Bonanza, Hallmark Hall of Fame, Bewitched, The Virginian, Green Acres, A Day for Justin. Each demanded slight adjustments: position, line delivery, the silence between sentences. Yet the goal did not change: keep the image from slipping outside the frame television had built. Johnny's childhood was therefore measured not by school years or summers, but by shooting schedules, waiting hours, tape marks on floors, and the early sense that being called in mattered more than anything else. Family Affair arrived at a moment when American living rooms needed a face that suggested everything could still remain steady, not through grand promises, but through small, familiar faces appearing at the same hour each week. In that time slot, Johnny was not only Jody Davis, and he became a familiar breath, something that helped the room on screen maintain order and allowed the room in real life to feel temporarily reassured. Outside the sitcom frame, late 1960s, America was not a calm space. Evening news carried images of the Vietnam War, street protests, and fractures still close in memory. The living room became a place where adults sought a different rhythm, not to understand the world, but to briefly disconnect from it. The television did more than broadcast programs. It held a temporary pocket of stillness, where order was performed as though it had never been broken. In that space, children on screen were not merely characters. They were signals that somewhere rooms still existed where things could be put back together gently. No explanation needed, no news required. Only a familiar face appearing on time, with the same voice, the same cadence, the same quiet promise that this week too would pass in a way one could bear. Family Affair operated precisely within that logic. No need for large climaxes, no need for prolonged conflict. The show placed children at the center of a family structure designed to absorb loss and soften it. For viewers, the importance was not the story of each episode. It was the repetition. The same room, the same faces, the same sense that order still had a place on screen. Johnny Whitaker entered that structure not as an ordinary child actor. He became part of a national rhythm, a face welcomed not for individuality, but for the ability to maintain stability. Audiences did not need to remember his name to recognize him. They only needed to see him appear to know they were in the right time slot, the right program, the right familiar feeling. Over time, that familiarity became a kind of collective memory. Johnny's image did not exist only within episodes. It existed in broadcast schedules, in the habit of turning on the television, in the way a generation tied its childhood to small faces on screen. Yet that also created a paradox. Television preserves images very well, but it has no structure for holding the child growing behind that image when the broadcast schedule shifts. When a face is repeated long enough in the same time slot, what is preserved is the image, not the person growing behind it. And when the schedule finally moves, Johnny does not simply lose a role. He must learn how to live within a rhythm no longer built for him to stand inside. In 1972, Johnny entered the Walt Disney production system not through grand premieres, but through a steady, extended work schedule. Snowball Express, The Biscuit Eater, and Napoleon and Samantha did not place him in heavily dramatic sequences, but they demanded a different kind of discipline, arriving on time, sustaining stable energy throughout long shooting days, and repeating the same emotional state across multiple takes, across multiple days in a row. On set, Johnny worked in outdoor locations, in scenes requiring constant movement, during long days under the sun or in spaces where temperature was poorly controlled. A teenager's body had to adapt to a work rhythm designed for adults. Keep smiling, stay focused, wait for the light, wait for the camera to be ready, then step back into the exact position marked on the ground. These films did not require Johnny to grow up on screen. They required him to grow up in how he worked, endure repetition, endure waiting, and keep his image unchanged across weeks of filming. Days were divided by the number of scenes completed, not by fatigue or enthusiasm. When one scene finished, the next was already called. When one film wrapped, a new schedule was already placed on the table. At an age when many other children measured time by school terms and holidays, Johnny measured it by call sheets, storyboards, and mornings that began earlier than most adults on the crew. There were no clear gaps between projects, only transitions from one film to the next with the same demand: remain ready. That production rhythm was not loud. It did not create an immediate crisis, but it formed an early habit. The value of a day was confirmed by being on set. When the schedule was full, everything felt steady. When the schedule thinned, empty space began to show. 1973 marked a significant shift in Johnny's career. With The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, he was for the first time given a role around which the entire rhythm of a feature film had to revolve. Unlike a sitcom, and where shooting schedules were divided into short units and characters could reasonably be absent in some episodes, Tom Sawyer required Johnny's continuous presence. Tom did not simply appear often. Tom carried the rhythm. Outdoor adventure sequences, musical numbers, transitions between character arcs, all passed through his presence. That meant the schedule was no longer simply shoot when he has a scene, but shoot when Johnny is ready. At an age when most child actors were still protected by light schedules and supporting roles, Johnny entered long filming days that repeated the same physical actions: running, climbing, jumping, speaking outdoors under natural light that was difficult to control. A climbing moment that looked spontaneous on screen might be filmed across several days, requiring him to maintain the same physical condition, emotional tone, and the energy level of a character who was always lively, even when his body was tired. This was also a musical. That meant Johnny was not only acting through movement, but had to sustain breath, rhythm, and vocal consistency between takes separated by hours, even days. The seamless continuity audiences saw was the result of a quiet discipline, keeping Tom today the same as Tom yesterday, but even when the filming environment had changed. When the film was released, the shift became clear. Johnny was no longer the familiar face appearing in a fixed television time slot. Tom Sawyer placed him into the cinematic experience, where audiences remained with the character through an uninterrupted narrative flow. There, if attention dropped, there were no commercials to rescue the moment. The responsibility for holding the rhythm rested entirely on the role. Tom Sawyer placed Johnny into a different type of work. The role was no longer built from isolated moments he could enter and exit safely. For the first time, he had to stay within the current of the story, from opening beats to climactic passages, and maintain the audience's attention without interruption across the film's full runtime. Not through explosive highlights, but through sustained presence, energy, and consistency across days of filming and scenes that flowed into one another on screen. Alongside film, Johnny continued appearing regularly on television in Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, created by Sid and Marty Krofft, airing in the Saturday morning slot on NBC. The show's production structure relied heavily on artificial sets, costumed characters, and effects. A scene often required many takes to match puppet movement, a dialogue rhythm, and editing pace. This was a different mechanism from feature films. Fewer outdoor locations, but more repeated takes within the same setup to ensure visual timing fit children's television formatting. In the same year, Johnny's schedule could include outdoor film shoots, interwoven with fixed studio days for Saturday morning television. Some weeks he left a film location at the end of one week and appeared on a television set at the beginning of the next. Time at home was cut into short intervals between shoots, not by one dramatic event, but by production schedules gradually replacing rhythms of life not tied to a set. As Johnny moved through adolescence, the rhythm of job calls within the system began to thin. Roles written for children closed by inertia, while adult roles did not open quickly enough. Calls that had once been regular became scattered. Auditions grew fewer. Filming schedules no longer organized his weeks. During the same period, Johnny finished high school and entered college. Mornings were tied to classes, coursework, and fixed academic schedules. Time once given to sets was filled with rhythms outside the industry. There was no announced decision to leave acting. The shift occurred on the calendar. School days replaced shooting days. Afterward, Johnny left the United States to serve a mission in Portugal through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Daily structure changed completely. No agents, no auditions, no filming schedules. Days were divided by missionary routine, studying Portuguese, traveling in pairs, meeting local communities, working in neighborhoods and churches. Clothing, hours, and routes were predetermined. American television was no longer a reference point in daily life. Within that structure, the label of former child star offered no practical advantage. Work was measured by hours walked, number of meetings, ability to communicate in a new language, and adherence to routine. Time passed inside a system unconnected to public image. Professional ties to Hollywood were not maintained by inertia. When Johnny returned, the entertainment system had continued forward with new faces and new projects. No shooting schedule waited. No role was held in place. His return happened within a structure that had changed without his presence for several years. Instead of stepping back in front of the camera, Johnny moved into behind-the-scenes roles. Consulting in computer systems for CBS placed him inside the corporate environment of television. Offices, technical systems, operational departments behind the screen. Presence was defined by function, not by broadcast image. At the same time, Johnny worked with Whitaker Entertainment, his family's company, in coordination and management roles. Work shifted from appearing to organizing. Schedules, contracts, contacts, and industry connections. During this period, he also managed Dana Plato, another former child star. The workspace moved toward support and coordination with direct exposure to the long-term effects of early fame, but from behind the scenes. Life was no longer marked by broadcast episodes or shooting days. It was divided by office hours, meetings, and tasks, unseen on screen. His career axis continued to move, but no longer centered where his public image had once been formed. In the late 1990s, Johnny Whitaker's name was called again in an auditorium, though not to introduce a new role. At the 1999 Youth in Film Awards, he stepped on stage when the Young Artist, former Child Star Lifetime Achievement Award, was announced. Lights, applause. A few minutes at the microphone. No filming schedule followed that evening. His name appeared in an awards program, then disappeared again from everyday production calendars. In the years that followed, his presence shifted into smaller spaces. In 2012, Johnny appeared in a radio studio with the Dr. Zod and Johnny Show. Microphones, headphones, mixing boards, broadcast schedules. Sessions took place at fixed times. No cameras, no studio lights. Voice replaced image. Presence was maintained by radio scheduling, not television framing. In 2013, Johnny appeared on stage with Judson Theater Company's production of To Kill a Mockingbird, playing Judge Taylor. Rehearsal rooms, paper scripts, stage lights, a darkened audience. Each performance ended when the lights went down. No recording for reruns. The role existed within the span of each night's show, then left with the audience. 3 years later, Johnny's name appeared in the credits of the reboot of Sigmund and the Sea Monsters on Amazon. A cameo, a short scene, a familiar face from the original program appearing inside a reconstructed world. No promotional campaign built around the return. Just one appearance. Enough for his name to be placed again within the same television universe once associated with him. These appearances did not form a dense production schedule. They existed as scattered points of light along a timeline: an awards stage, a radio studio, a theater audience, a brief frame in a reboot. Between those points were stretches without cameras, without broadcast schedules, without regular television presence. As the machinery of his career gradually slowed, Johnny's private life entered a period where losses were no longer shielded by filming schedules or new roles. This was a stretch of life he did not live in public, yet it carried some of his longest-lasting wounds. In 1987, Johnny married Gretchen Pomeranz, a relationship that remained relatively quiet, unconnected to glamorous Hollywood imagery. The marriage produced no children and ended in divorce in 1988 after about a year. There was no scandal, no public statements. The separation unfolded quietly, reflecting a reality Johnny later acknowledged more than once. He entered marriage while still carrying unresolved pain accumulated from earlier years. A void had already formed in Johnny's life even before the personal tragedies that followed. In 1976, Anissa Jones, the face who had stood beside him throughout family affair, died at 18. For the public, it was a brief, sad headline in the flow of entertainment news. For Johnny, it was the moment a shared piece of childhood was cut out of the timeline. They had not only shared a set, they had shared a very particular way of growing up, learning together how to stand on a mark, deliver the right line, preserve an image while still too young to understand what was being traded away. When Anissa was gone, Johnny did not just lose a former co-star. He lost a witness to his own childhood, the one person who understood what it meant to grow up under lights without having the language to name what had been taken. As Anissa's death did not close like an old memory, it remained in the way Johnny moved into the years that followed, quieter, more guarded, and always carrying the sense that things once held tightly could disappear without warning. In later relationships, Johnny spoke little about his past. He avoided mentioning sets, avoided the years when broadcast schedules had kept everything aligned. His private life was built through very concrete details: regular dates kept, evenings spent together longer than usual, small conversations about a room that would need rearranging, a name mentioned and then left unfinished, not as a grand plan, but as a way of trying to give the future a shape that could be touched. When that woman became pregnant, the rhythm of life began to shift gently. Schedules were kept more carefully, calls were returned more quickly, small decisions were made earlier. There were no big announcements, only the sense that this time, a new part of life was being set down, real enough to require thinking about tomorrow in a different way. Then she died, along with the unborn child. Johnny did not go into detail. The story exists only in a few lines in interviews. But in his life, what vanished was not just two people. A new rhythm that had just begun to form was pulled away before it could become habit. There were items that no longer had use, appointments that no longer had a reason to remain on the calendar. Questions from others answered briefly or deflected. Some evenings, Johnny did not stay home. And some nights he drove for long stretches with no clear destination, simply to avoid sitting still in a space once imagined to hold one more person. What was lost left no memory to hold on to. It left an emptiness. That emptiness began to press into each day, not through visible collapses, but through small displacements. Difficulty staying in one room, inability to hold on to plans beyond a few days, mornings waking unsure whether he had promised to meet anyone at all. Remaining in one place too long felt heavy. Belongings were packed, unpacked, then packed again. Some nights he left home just to avoid facing the same wall. Plans once spoken aloud were no longer written down. The future did not disappear. It became blurred. like something no longer solid enough to place on a calendar. At first, Johnny simply tried to give the day some shape. Evenings stretched long to avoid going home early. Mornings began late to delay confronting an empty schedule. In those spaces, alcohol did not appear as a decision, but as a small tool to sleep more easily, to stop thinking, to keep the room quiet long enough. Over time, alcohol and other substances began filling those gaps. At first to sleep, then to avoid thinking, then to let the day pass without needing clear structure. My days were no longer divided by work hours or routine. They were divided by maintaining a familiar state for a few more hours. Old relationships thinned out. Calls went unanswered. New circles formed in spaces without fixed schedules, places where no one asked about tomorrow and no one needed to know how yesterday had gone. There were periods when Johnny no longer had stable housing. Addresses changed. Belongings fit into a few bags. Nights passed in temporary spaces where the next day was not defined in advance. There was no set to return to, no studio, no work schedule requiring him to be present on time. Time lost its familiar shape. During those years, there was a moment when Johnny's body reached a limit it could not reverse on its own. A medical crisis occurred, and he was brought out of danger through timely intervention. There were no public images, no major headlines. The information appeared only in later accounts. But it marked a break in his personal timeline, a moment that showed how far his body had been pushed. Family intervened in private spaces. Conversations did not happen in front of media. Decisions were made internally. Who would stay? Who would take him? Who would be responsible for keeping things from continuing to spiral? No announcements, only movements, appointments, and being present in places without an audience. September 25, 1997 is a date Johnny has mentioned as a marker on the calendar. It was the day he entered a recovery program. Not a press conference, not a television appearance, just showing up at the right place at the right time and agreeing to step into a new disciplined structure. The days that followed were organized around a fixed routine. Mornings, evenings, meetings, hours, repeating week to week. No filming schedules, no movement between sets. Instead, a steady structure, the same location, the same time slots, the same group of people, the same procedures. Time was measured not by projects or production deadlines, but by completing one full day according to the schedule set in place. Since late 1997, Johnny has maintained a sober and clean life. There were no announcements, no defining images. The process unfolded outside the media and outside the entertainment industry. Milestones were no longer tied to roles or contracts, but to the number of days, weeks, and months he remained stable within a recovery program. Johnny's mornings begin in meeting rooms without a stage. Chairs arranged in a circle, a small table against the wall with files, participant lists, and working materials. No opening act, just roll call, the start of the session, and keeping to the allotted time. Meetings follow fixed schedules, independent of mood or inspiration. Johnny was trained to work as an addiction counselor. His role is not to tell his personal story, but to maintain the structure of the session, listening, asking brief questions, and taking notes, and keeping the process from drifting away from its purpose. Some people come regularly, some leave midway, some sit silent through the entire meeting. The work does not produce dramatic peaks, but it creates a steady rhythm over time. Very different from the rhythm of television production, where each week was measured by broadcast schedules and public response. His workspace is not limited to recovery centers. There are visits to correctional facilities, long corridors, the sound of locking doors, common rooms with plastic tables, plastic chairs, and high windows. In those sharing sessions, Johnny does not carry his former title. He carries the story of someone who once slipped out of structure, enough for the person across from him to recognize that this room is not the only place where order has been lost. In community talks, Johnny often recounts his journey in very brief terms. No built-up climax, no crafted inspirational arc, just specific markers. The date he entered recovery, the early meetings where it was hard to keep pace, the times he wanted to leave the room, the late-night phone calls. Those details help listeners see a life rhythm held together by small, repeated decisions. Alongside counseling work, Johnny takes part in efforts connected to reform within correctional systems. Small meetings, discussions with policy advocacy groups, no cameras following closely, no large media campaigns. The work happens in rooms without names, where the question is not image, but how systems are holding human beings. Johnny also spends time writing. A desk, a computer, hours alone, arranging fragments of memory not in broadcast order. His memoir formed in that rhythm. Not to rebuild a public image, but to place events into an order he himself can look back on without needing to turn away. Another part of his current life appears through a documentary project concerning drug policy in Portugal. Trips, filming sessions, conversations with experts and people within the system. Johnny does not stand at the center of the film. He appears as someone bringing personal experience to compare with a different social model, where the question is not only punishment, but how a nation organizes its response. Occasionally, Johnny appears in small, independent film projects, limited sets, small crews, short working days, roles not designed to return him to the center. Projects such as Sky Blue are mentioned in interviews as a very small part of his life's rhythm, existing alongside his primary work. Johnny now lives in California. Days are divided among meetings, trips, and the quiet intervals needed to keep the established rhythm from breaking. There are no long-term shooting schedules, no broadcast seasons. Life is held together by repeated actions, showing up, listening, taking notes, leaving the room, preparing for the next session. In Johnny's present life, no single frame is wide enough to contain it all. Only small rooms, long corridors, and conversations not broadcast. There, he exists not as an image preserved, but as a person maintaining a structure strong enough not to collapse. In American television memory of the 1960s, Johnny Whitaker still appears as Jody Davis, the boy standing in a familiar living room where every conflict was softened by adult voices and family laughter. Family Affair was not just a show, it was a model, a template of the American family replayed thousands of times, where childhood was placed into safe, tidy light, easy to believe in. That image lasted a long time, preserved on tape, in rerun channels, in the memories of viewers who grew up with black and white screens. But Johnny's real life did not remain in that position. When the child star template no longer had space to grow, the path behind the camera opened in a completely different direction. Not broadcast, not framed, not prearranged. For many years, the name Johnny Whitaker appeared in discussions about former child stars not as a symbol of continued success, but as an example of a fractured trajectory. Early fame, loss of structure, falling out of the system. Yet that trajectory did not end at the fall. It extended into another role. Not on screen, not tied to a character, without a script. Johnny's path is not measured by the number of later roles. It shows through a rare movement, from a child shaped by a system's image to an adult who stepped out of that structure, then returned in an entirely different way, not to be seen, but to be present in rooms where others are trying to remain standing. In recovery communities, in correctional facilities, in talks without cameras, Johnny appears not as a symbol, but as a real person, not to inspire according to a script, not to tell a beautiful story, but to sit, to listen, and to remain in the room long enough so someone else does not have to be alone with their darkest parts. There are no monuments to those moments, no compilation clips, no images replayed on television. Only the memories of people who once sat in a small room, listening to someone once known across America speak about days without cameras, without shooting schedules, and without a character to hide behind. There, presence is no longer measured by being seen. It is sustained by showing up on time, sober enough, attentive enough, on days when simply not walking away is already a choice. His story does not close with a clear victory, nor does it end with a Hollywood-style comeback. It continues in rooms without stages, where no one applauds, where success is measured by a day passing without returning to old paths. In that space, Johnny is no longer playing a role. He is a person once known across America who fell out of the system's center and then built for himself a structure strong enough not to collapse, not before a camera, but in real life. And from that trajectory, one question still hangs, not only for Johnny Whitaker, but for Hollywood itself. What truly happens to children when the cameras turn off? And who bears responsibility for the life that begins afterward?